Don't be nervous. Okay, so hi all. Thank you for coming today. So today I'm going to tell you about a few functionalities of the Excel pivot tool with some examples. Before I start, I'd like to emphasize that this training is designed for someone that doesn't have a lot of experience with pivot tables. So we'll go ahead and get started. So looking at today's agenda, I'll go over what are pivot tables and why they matter. I'll go over some simple examples, and then I'll show some examples of how we can use pivot tables here at RSS. 2 examples coming from statements and 2 examples coming from calculation debugging. And then at the end, I'll hand you figuratively a bag of tricks that you can use the Excel pivot table for. So data fields, slicers, calculated fields, calculated items, a pivot chart, and pulling data from multiple sheets. So we'll go ahead and dive in. So pivot tables and their powers. So according to the internet, you Google, they're one of Excel's most powerful features. In more logical terms, it's a special Excel tool that allows you to summarize and explore data interactively. Usually when we're given large result sets, the data is hard to understand because there's too much detail. Pivot tables are a perfect tool for resolving this issue. We can transform huge numbers of rows and columns into a meaningful, nicely formatted report. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at a simple example. Okay, so looking at this data set, we can see that we have 6 different columns. We have an order, product, category, amount, date, country, etc., etc. We have about 200 rows, and there isn't much that we can do with this data manually. So some examples that someone can ask you are, what are the total sales by product? What are the total sales by country, category, etc., etc. And so the first thing that we have to do is just click anywhere on this data set, go to Insert, and then Pivot Table. And notice how here on this table range, Excel is smart enough to know that the data starts in column A, row 1, and then it goes from column up to column F, row 214. And then it gives us this option of where we want to place the pivot table, so it can be placed on a new worksheet or an existing worksheet. So we'll go ahead and put it on a new worksheet for now. So the first thing that comes up is this pivot table chart, and then this pivot data field. So notice if I'm on this, but I click off, then the pivot table fields disappear. There's also one thing, you can drag this around, so you can pull it closer to your pivot table just in case you want to have it closer if you had a bigger sheet. So answering these questions, we can go ahead and click on product, and then we can click on amount. So notice how all the numeric values go directly to the values part of the pivot table, and by default all the fields go to the rows. So here it's easy to see that apples sold this amount, bananas sold this amount, etc., etc. And if we wanted to switch back and forth between fields, we can do amount by country. We can change back to category, and so we can see which of the 2 fruits or vegetables sold the most. And then what if we wanted to see products by sales and by country? So we can select product, and then we can select country. Now this country field right now it gets kind of like output into apples, and then it gets like kind of like on our statements, it gets put on the next row. But we can also put country over here, and then it goes ahead and it creates this nice table, and it tells you which countries didn't sell something, for example, which countries didn't sell beans, and then we can just format it in a lot of different ways. And then, for example, if we wanted to sort it, we can, for example, let's say we wanted to see the top selling I think this is product. So we can go to filter, top 10, and we can also see which are the top, I can't see that one, 3, for example, etc., etc. So with this simple example, we can start to see some of the powers of the pivot table. And I'll go ahead and move forward. Are there any questions so far? Okay. So next we'll go and see how they can be used at RSS. We'll start off with statements. The example that I chose is coming from Bandai, which is one of our existing customers. So I'll go ahead and open this hyperlink. This is the statement mockup. And then I chose this specific contract ID, shortfall 1-cross, just in case someone wants to go back and see it for themselves. I also went ahead and I got this new section, or this section test from that contract. And before today's meeting, I created a pivot table that reflects this statement. So here we can see, for example, under units for project 1A, we have 45, 10, 10, 65. And we have the exact same thing here, 45, 10, 10, 65. And it goes through and it works for the rest of the table. So I'll go ahead and create this from scratch for us. So here we have a standard calc result from this contract for that period. So again, just click anywhere on the data set, and then we'll go ahead and insert a pivot table. So notice again how Excel is smart enough to get the range and tell us to put it on a neat worksheet. So the way I approached this first was by looking at the statement mockup. So we can see that the first row should be a product TC. So we'll go ahead and add product, and then we'll go ahead and add, for example, the units. So now notice how we have all these extra products. We have to start filtering it down. So I'll go ahead and add the statement account for this mockup, which is statement net receipts and royalty earnings. So we'll go ahead and go to activity type. Where are you? There you are. And we'll put this over here. And then we'll go ahead and filter this activity type for our specific account. So again, statement net receipts. And so the next steps that we want to do are start adding these other fields. So the revenue type, the platform TC, the product type. So the first thing I'll do is add the revenue type. So here we run into an issue. We can see that we have box sales, digital sales, and other sales and statement sales. So if we go into Alliant and we go to data, and then we go to revenue type, we can see that the box sales and other sales are at level 2, but we want to have this at level 1. And same for these digital sales. So what we can do is select the box sales and other sales. Sorry, box sales, other sales. Right click, and here the pivot. Sorry. The pivot table gives us the option to group these two. So notice how here we have revenue type 2 and revenue type. So it grouped the box sales and other sales into this group. And I can go ahead and rename this to box. And I can do the same thing for the digital sales and the statement sales and group that into digital. Okay. So now we have an extra row, and we can just get rid of it. And then this revenue type, the field settings, we can call this rev type level 1. And then then it starts looking better. Next thing we can do is add the platform TC, and then after that we can start adding the product type, which should be over there. Okay, yeah, thank you. So notice how right now it's kind of staggered. One thing we can do is switch this manually. So we can go here, and then we can get rid of the subtotals for this level, and then show this in tabular form. So it starts putting things more like we're used to. We can do this for all of the other ones. Let me take a quick second and do that. So now we can see that we have, for Project 1A, we have box, console, PlayStation, etc., etc. And one thing that we can do is we can right-click and get rid of the row subtotals, or the grand total. Okay, and then I think for the mockup we have for the project, we do have the sum, and then we also want to add and insert a blank line so that we can see it more nicely. So here we go. Now we have our pivot table, and we can compare this to our section test. Let me put them side by side. And again, we have Project 1A, box, PC, collector's edition, and then we have the units 4510, 010, 65. So usually I think calculation TCs have trouble testing their data because the statements aren't ready. So this is an easy way of creating the statement from the calculation results. I'll go ahead and go to and then from the units we can also add, for example, amount, and then we can see the rates, which are the extra fields in the mockup. So units, amount, and then rate. Okay. So we'll go ahead and move on. Yes, we don't need this anymore.
I didn't know you could do the grouping like that.
Yeah, it's really cool. The only thing that's not great is that we can't go the other way. I'll go ahead and create another pivot table from scratch. So this one is for the section test for the net revenue. This one's a little different because the accounts aren't there isn't only one account for the mockup. So we'll start seeing some of the defects from the pivot table. So again, I'll do that, and let me minimize this for now so we can see the results later. And we'll go ahead and open the mockup. Did I close the mockup? No, I did not. So again, click anywhere on the data, insert a pivot table, go here, enter the product. I'll go a little faster on this one just because we already did the other one. And then activity type. And then filter. I think we also have statement net receipts on here. And then we'll go ahead and start adding the revenue type next. And then after this, we have to add the platform TC. So do you guys see it? Oh, there we go. Yeah. And then we'll have to add the product type.
A little bit. Yeah,
I'm blind from here. So I'll add the units for now. So notice how last time I went through and one by one I updated the layout and I made a tabular form. What we can also do is go to add design and then subtotals, and then we can get rid of the subtotals. We can turn off the row grand totals or the column, and I think we only need it for the columns. And then we can start, and then where are you? Report layout, sorry. And then we want to show this in tabular form. So,
Hooray!
yeah. So I can't emphasize this enough. The pivot tables are a great way of automating a lot of work that we would do manually. So one of the defects about this pivot table, it's not perfect, is if we added, for example, statement sales here. So let me go back to the filter. And we look for statement sales. Forgot the alphabet.
That happens when you're talking.
Right. So here we have statement sales, and then we'll go ahead and add units. Amount. And then we'll go ahead. We have units, amount. Let's see what other fields we have on here. Units 2 and amount 2. So go ahead and add amount 2 and units 2. So if we look at this bigger, we can see that for the statement sales, the amount 2 and units 2 are pretty much meaningless. And there isn't really an easy way of getting rid of these unless you hide the column. And then it's really hard to order things around. The only way we can order things around are by the sum values or by the activity types. So if we switch the ordering to sum values, we'll have the units next to the amount and so forth. So units next to units and then amount and amount. So then we can start seeing some of the defects from the pivot table. So I think this is enough for statements, so I'll go ahead and move forward to the calculations. Are there any questions so far?
Are the defects you're talking about really kind of the same kind of issues we have with alignment when we're trying to do things?
Their issues are mainly focused on kind of like putting them next to each other, the amounts. So for example, in the mock-up here, where did it go? So you see for this mock-up, there's units next to amount, but for different activity types, you can't put them next to each other like this.
I got it.
But you could,
Just one at a time.
if you were worried about alignment on a statement and wondering if you could put a rate in the statement with all of the accounts that it's getting, that would show you if there was misalignment issues.
Yeah, okay. So you could test it.
Right.
Yeah. But it's similar to an issue that, because like one thing when we're making info sheets, if we need amount and units and all that stuff, we have to make 4 different info sheets. One for amount, one for units.
Right.
So that's I guess it's a similar issue.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if that's really a defect. It's like,
Yeah.
Functionality.
yeah, functionality.
The way it works.
Yeah.
Right, but there's no way of hiding the units for one activity type without not hiding the units for a different activity type. So that was the defect that I was trying to highlight.
Oh yeah, like better filtering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll go ahead and open up another issue. So this issue is coming from the training assignment for calculation debugging. I did this a long time ago. So the first thing, we have this problem posed by a PC. It says, ITD sales are double what we're expecting them to be. Notice that current is half of ITD, but this is the first period, so they should be the exact same. So, I don't know, if we had like a way bigger calc result, it would be really hard to filter down and see exactly where the amounts doubled. So the first thing we'll do is just go ahead and insert a pivot table. And then what we can do is add the calc sort. So notice again how, since the calc sort is numeric, it goes straight to the values. But we can put this over here on the rows, and we can just, for aesthetic purposes, put the calculation name, which I think is first. And then we can go ahead and add the amount. And then we can add the trans type, since we talked about current versus ITD. And then we can go ahead and put this over here. So now we have current and ITD sales, and then I'm just going to go ahead and skip. And then we can see here.
You can filter the account.
Yeah, we can filter the account on sales. No. There we go. So we can see here that there's a discrepancy. Let me get rid of the subtotals. And here. I think that was it. So we can start seeing the changes.
What's that last column? The 70.
Oh,
Total.
yeah.
Oh, it's
Unspecified. Okay. Yeah. This is the trans type.
Gotcha.
We can also use these pivot tables for calculation result comparisons. This one was brought up to me by Christy. So this was from an upgrade that occurred, and there were differences in the calculation results from a line 5.5 to line 6.5 or 6.6, I think.
Yep, 5.5,
Yeah.
6.6.
Yeah. I haven't even looked. Okay.
I can chime in too.
Okay, so here we have the results for 6.6 and the results for 5.5. So I'll go ahead and make a copy of this one. Move it to the end. Copy.
And this one, you can see the results are enormous.
Right, and yeah, this one it would be really hard to go through and try to filter down manually, just because there are like 800,000 results. So for this one, since we already have the columns on the combined data set already, we'll go ahead and Control Shift down right and then down bottom. We'll go ahead and copy this, and then we can go here and then go all the way to the bottom and then all the way to the left, and then paste that on there. So now we have the data set combined, and notice that now we have 2 times bigger the data that we once had.
Does this have the column on the right?
Where do you know which?
Which is which?
Yes, I think
There,
the
yeah.
6.6. Yeah, so it
Okay.
has the version, and then at the bottom we have the 5.5. So we can go ahead and insert the pivot table, and again, we'll go on a new worksheet. Okay, and for the values, I think it was for the cost. And then we want to add the calc sort on there. And then the calculation. I think there's construction upstairs. Right?
It's hard to tell.
And then the run, which is what we're comparing on. So the run can go up here. And then we can see how we have 5.5 and 6.6. So if you if you go down, you can like compare the values between the two. And once you get down, I think it was finals, we can start seeing that there's a difference in the numbers. So then this will help the calculation PC know exactly where to start looking, which is way easier than filtering these results sets manually. Okay, so let's go ahead and move forward to the bag of tricks. Yeah, that's in the tricks.
Okay.
So here are 6 tricks that I found online that I think are probably the most essential to know of pivot tables. So the first one is data field default function. So the sum function is used by default for all numeric fields. Notice when we added a numeric field, it did the sum. But sometimes it'll do the count operation. And then this can happen for one of 2 cases. It'll happen if, or actually one, but one is a subset of the other. It'll happen if we select the incorrect range, and it can happen if one of the columns has an empty row or no value in there. So I'll go ahead and open my first trick. Okay, so again we have this data set, and if, for example, I highlight up here, and then I insert, and then pivot table, notice how now it doesn't recognize the row that it starts at and the one it ends at, and it does it by the column. So we'll go ahead and add that, and then if we, for example, wanted to add amount on here, it goes straight to the row instead of the sum value. So it's just like something nice to know that you need to make sure that you're selecting the right data set. I think that happens pretty
a lot.
Yeah.
The irritating thing is if you move the amount over to the data field, it'll say count. And you have to go in and manually set the field value.
Right. So, for example, also if I...
Wait, how did that happen?
So I highlighted up here, because usually when we export calc results from
versus just
selecting here, and then so if I select here,
selected a bunch of blank rows.
yeah, it selected everything down below. So for example, here I deleted the value for the amount. So now if I go ahead and then I insert pivot table, and then we select amount, which is down below. Oh, sorry. Refresh. So, again, if the data set has incomplete information, all the numeric fields will be interpreted as rows or counts, and then we'll get this count here. And then I don't know if you guys noticed this, but I did this refresh
Counts
of the amounts.
Those aren't counts.
Oh no, these aren't counts. These are just the actual values. Sorry.
If you drag it over to values.
Yeah. If I drag it here, it'll give you the count.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Sorry about that. So and then one thing, I don't know if you guys saw, so I'll do it again. I'll go here and then go to the amount. If I re-enter it, and then I go back to my data, and then I refresh this, and then I unselect and then reselect amount, it'll give me back the sum. So it's just like heads up, there's a refresh button if your data changes. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next trick. So one really cool thing about the pivot table is that we have these things called slicers. And usually when we're filtering our calc results with activity type, we have to go through a big drop-down menu, and it's hard to tell which account we're filtering on specifically. So this allows us to more easily see what we're seeing. So, for example, if I go home and let's say I put data and then I filter and I go to the account, for some other results we can have like a bunch of, and we have to slide down. So it's a lot easier to just use these things called slicers.
And
So,
if they're long, sometimes you can't see the right.
right, yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
Okay.
So I'll go ahead and insert a pivot table, and then I'll put a product, and then I'll put an amount. Actually, let's use activity type since it has more fields. Account. So we have to, again, click on a pivot table, and then we'll go to Analyze, and then this thing called Insert Slicer. And then it'll give you the option to insert a slicer for every field. And I'm going to choose it for the account. So notice how now we have this here instead. So I can just choose the returns, or the reserves taken. I can choose these, et cetera, et cetera.
So you can control click and shift.
Yeah, you can just control. It's like regular.
Wow.
Yeah. There's also a specific type of slicer that we can use. So if I get rid of the account, move the field, and I'll enter the actual period. We can also insert timeline. So I'll insert it for the actual period. And notice how this one filters down specifically to the fields that have time in them. So we have this thing, this cool little gadget here. And we can select, for example, January, or we can, again, scroll all the way down to June if we wanted to see like a semi-annual thing. So that's a really nice feature of the pivot tables.
I'm sorry, where did you select this time?
So if you're not on the pivot table, then this Analyze and Design, these two tabs disappear.
Okay.
So they disappear. So when you're on here, you can just go to Analyze, and then Slicer is the one that I entered first for the activity type, or the account.
Timeline.
And then Timeline is the one for the dates.
Got it.
So this could be useful if you're selling stuff, if you want to see what time of the year you sell certain products better than the others. So I'll go ahead and move on to the next trick. Are there any questions? Okay.
I wonder if that works for like, if we have like, 2012-01, 2012-02.
For the bad period.
Yeah, just,
For a month?
yeah, just like the format, like whether Excel would recognize that they're
They get treated like
months.
Yeah, it does.
Did we just do that? Didn't we just do
No,
that?
but Lifeway has a weird format.
Oh.
There's a Jan, like,
Yeah.
and
I mean, here you can do
Oh, the
months,
format.
years, quarters. So we can change this back and forth. Is that what you mean?
no,
Oh.
so go back to the,
Or like,
well, see how like the data, it says it's formatted as Jan-12,
Right.
but we would often format it as 2012-01.
2012-01, or just 2012-01.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I would have to go back and see if that works. I did this specifically for this calculation as well.
It would depend if Excel knew how to translate the date format into something that Excel,
I think Excel's fine.
because if the format is a weird thing, I've seen Excel translated into an improper date, and that could.
Oh, yeah, because it might just think it's a number.
I've seen it throw all of the dates into the open year because it's not really interpreting the date of the month correctly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
You don't know about.
So that takes me to trick 3, I think. Okay. So another feature of pivot tables are calculated fields. So in a pivot table, you can create a new field that performs a calculation on the sum of the other tables. Of the other fields. Let me go ahead and show you when we use this at RSS. So for example, for our WW Norton, we have this your share column. So this is 100% of the 75. So for example, I think this column is M20 times K20, so M times K, and it gives you that. So we can create a column like this with the pivot table. So I'll go ahead and show an example. And hyperlink. Oops, sorry. Okay, so this is an example or a copy of the pivot table that I used for the royalty detail that I created earlier. So the way to add these calculated fields are, again, we go to Analyze, and then we go to Fields, and then we go to Calculated Fields. So, for example, if, let's say we wanted to increase, or wanted to see units increase by 5% next year, we can call this, for example, 5% increase. And then here, so this is similar to info sheets where we can just select the fields. So I can go down and look for units, insert that, times 1.05, and then we can add this. Okay. So notice how it added it here, and now we have this extra column, which is 45 times 1.05. One other thing that we can do is multiply it with the royalty rate. And so earlier I went ahead and did extra work because there's one defect with the pivot tables, which is that it won't accept a string in an if statement for the calculated fields. So thank you, Peter, by the way.
You can't say, quote, yes, unquote, or something like that.
No, it interprets every string as 0 inside here. So I think this is not the right. Where is, okay, so if we wanted to put the royalty method, for example, that would be impossible to do without adding an extra column. So let me open this one.
Is adding an extra column the problem?
No, that's what I did in the
royalty method into numbers.
Yeah. Sorry?
You're going to translate the royalty methods into numbers.
Right. So here, it for unspecified, I set them equal to 0, and if it's percent of net receipts, I set it equal to 1.
Yeah.
And so then, if we go to this here, I went ahead and did the work just because I knew we'd run out of time. And then if we go to Analyze, and we look at the calculated field, and then we look at the royalty earned, for example, then I did this if statement where you have if the royalty method indicator equals 1, in this case net receipts, then you do amount times royalty rate, and then if otherwise it would be a unit per unit rate, and then we do units times the royalty rate. So then we can see here that for the percent of net receipts, it does 0.1 times the amount, which is 10% of that. And then for this, for the 0 for the unspecified, it does 10 times 10 for the units for the per unit rate, and it gives us back 100. So that's something really cool that I found that you can do with the pivot table.
Can you actually compare the pivoted results that way? So when we were doing the 5-5 compared to the 6 results with the amount total, could you use a calculated field that would get the difference between the two? So
Yes.
it's easier to idle? Okay.
No.
Sure,
No, I don't think so. I think this, that's what I want to talk about next. Some of the limitations are that it only works for different fields.
You can
add a column.
Yeah, it's like equals indirect address minus.
I mean, it's not part of the pivot table.
Yeah.
You can also do conditional formatting and have it highlight ones that are different automatically. That would be something you could do with pivot tables.
Yeah, so for example, I can't, like if we had 2 units on here, you couldn't combine units of statement of receipts with units of sales. So that's one of the problems with the pivot tables.
Combining two accounts.
Yes. Oh, and also one thing that doesn't work. Right. One thing that doesn't work is it won't work on the subtotals. It'll just do it on like the entire data set versus just what's here. Like you would expect for this times whatever's there and then give you what's here. But it won't work like that. Okay, we're running out of time, so I'll work a little faster. So we have a calculated item, and a calculated item becomes an item in a pivot field So like if we wanted to join, for example, 2 accounts, we can create a new calculated item that creates the sum of, or gets the sum of those 2 accounts. So I'll go.
You said combine 2 accounts?
Right. So I'll show you.
Bring the names together?
Yeah. So,
Okay.
so for example, this is a weird data set, but we have the masterings in the U.S. for the past 30 years. So if we go ahead and insert a pivot table, and then we go here, and then let's say we wanted to see gender, and then total fatality. Here we go. Right, so notice how here we have M/F, male/female, unknown, and blank. What we can do, instead of seeing just all of those there, we can go here and add a calculated item. And for gender, we can do, let me call this unidentified. And here we can add MF, insert item, plus male/female, insert item, unknown. I think you can select, okay. And then blank. And then we can add that. And then we press OK. And notice how unidentified is here now. And it's a sum of all these other 3. Right, so that's one thing. There are some drawbacks to this though. So now that we have this gender here, we can't put it on the report filters. Notice how it won't let me put it on here. And we also can't add duplicate values or duplicate fields. So if we wanted to add another fatalities here, then it won't let us. So it says multiple data fields of the same field are not supported when a pivot table has a calculated item. So that's a drawback from the table. So if I delete this and start from scratch, if I go back to insert and pivot table, and then I go ahead and create one, and then we add fatalities and we add gender. So now gender can go back here because it doesn't have the item anymore. And if we wanted to add another fatalities column, we can do that. And reasons why you would do 2 of the same are because you can switch this show value as instead of a no calculation, like % of grand total or something, and then it gives us these percentages. So those are drawbacks from the calculated item. Chrissy, I'm running out of time. Should I go ahead and finish?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. There.
If anyone else needs to go, you can just leave.
Okay. So I'll go quickly. So the next one is a pivot chart. So I'll skip to this example. It's a little more cooler. So what I went ahead and did here was I created a pivot table, and then I created this chart based off of the product and the country. So here we can see, like, visually, if we want to see things visually, how much the United States sold in bananas versus apples, and comparing by country, instead of if you don't want to see numbers. And then I'll go ahead and do the last trick, which is a little lengthier. Oh, sorry. Let me show you real quick. If we wanted to create a pivot chart, it's here, right here. So it allows us to choose different types of charts. You can play with those later on. And lastly, okay, trick number 6. So notice how we have this customer info, order info, and payment info. There's 3 different tables, and they're all related by this order ID, 1000 through 1011. So Excel 2013 and above has this new feature where we can connect different data from different sheets. So we can go ahead and insert a table, and we go ahead, let me call this customer And then this one, insert a table, and call this, wait, did I insert a pivot table? Accidentally. And then this one can be order. And then the last one, insert a table. And then, okay, call this payment. And now what we can do is create a pivot table. So no, this is the last one I haven't talked about. So it's add this data to the data model. This is what allows us to connect data from multiple sheets. So we'll go ahead and create this new pivot table. Now notice the only difference between this pivot table and the ones from before is that we have this all button. So here we have this customer, we have order, and we have payment. So for example, we can put sales, order number, this should go here. And then we can track the month, etc., etc. And then, yeah. So it allows us to, oh, sorry. I'm trying to go a bit fast. We have to, I skipped a few steps. In order to get these tables to connect, we have to go to Analyze Relationships. We have to create a new relationship. So, for example, payment, and then order number, and we connect that with order number. So that's how it connects it. And then we can connect this one to the other table. So payment. Yeah, it's kind of like a join with SQL for those of us that are familiar with SQL Server or databases. And then order number. So I'll go ahead and close this, and then sales order, and put this over here, and let's say the month. So for example, 1,000 in March, and then we go to 1,000. It was in March, and then it tells us the value, which is 1,106. So order, and then they all come from the different sheets. So yeah, that's it. Sorry I kept you guys here a little longer. We started a bit late. So.
Really good.
I hope you guys enjoyed it. And do you guys have any questions for me?
Later.
Later. We have a lot.
I'm glad we recorded this. This was great, and you were so well prepared.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very good, like all the.
Good job.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah. I thought I was gonna use this, but I didn't.
Oh, like that.
You're like a cooking show. You had the finished thing.
Let's choose to do the finished thing.
Okay, do my book.
And after 5 hours, you'll get that.
Is this old?
Yeah.
Stable microphone.
Bye, Connie. Thank you.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
honestly.